Hello guys, in last video we run all this code and the output we got when we run this asynchronous function was undefined. Let's run this code once again to verify, and here it is. The output we are getting is undefined. So the question is how to handle asynchronous function. So one thing we must have to keep in our mind is that if we want to handle asynchronous function, we have to handle that function inside function only. So for example, right now we have this setTimeout function. In this setTimeout function, we pass parameter. First parameter is function and second parameter is the time. But as you can see that after 2 seconds, this function runs. So we handle this setTimeout function within this definition of function only. So this is the key to handle asynchronous function. So for that, first of all, we will remove extra code, that we won't gonna print any output which coming from asynchronous function, but instead of that we're gonna handle this function inside this function only. Now our main motto is that we want to fetch whatever this asynchronous function returns to us. Currently after 2 seconds this function returns number 1 to us. So how can we do that? First thing we must have to understand here is that asynchronous function always takes some time. So after that some time we must have to create a facility which listen to the value we return after some time. Let's see how can we achieve that. So first of all, in this setTimeout function, once this function runs, we get this output return 1. Now what we do is that instead of returning something, what we will do is that after 2 seconds completed, we will call a function named callback, and the whatever value our function produce, we will pass this value in this callback function. Now first of all, why we are using this callback function? By definition, callback function is the functions which get called when something happened. So after 2 seconds happens, we are calling this callback function. As we call this function, we have to listen this function through this function only. So for that, I'll create one function inside this function. Okay, so this callback function is the function which has same definition like this function. So right now in this function we are passing number 1. So inside this function we will use a parameter, say data, and the whatever value we pass through this callback we will get here inside this function. In fact, we print this value. For that we use console.log. Now we printing this data. Now the thing is that we have used this asynchronous function, but how we know that asynchronous function has callback function, right? So for that we reference this callback function inside the definition of the function, naming as callback. So if you look at this function, you can understand when we run this asynchronous function, we have to run this callback function, and whatever the value we pass through this asynchronous function, we will get this value through the parameters of the functions. So as of now we are calling this asynchronous function. Once this function start to run, after 2 seconds this function will call back a function with the value 1. We get this value 1 through this function. Now we are printing this value. So let's run this code. Let's see what happens. And here we are. After waiting of 2 seconds, we get output 1. So this is the simplest example of callback function. But basically, when we use callback function, in this callback function, we usually get 2 values. The first value we usually get is the error value, and the second value is usually a data. So how we will get a error value? First of all, this is the function we are calling here. This function is totally a position based function. So if at first position whatever you pass consider as error, and on second position whatever you pass is considered as data. So right now at first position we are passing number 1. So if you print error over here and run this code, after waiting of 2 seconds you will get value 1. So to pass number 1 as a data, what we have to do is at the position 1 we have to pass any error message. If we don't have any error message, we have to pass undefined value there, and since undefined is the value for error and 1 is the value of the data, now we print data here and we run this code, and here we get value number 1. So as this function returns either error or data, how can we understand what our callback function is really returning? So for that we use if-else condition. So in if we get data, we print on the console that yes, we have got data, otherwise we have got the error. So we will print error over here. So this is how we handle error or data condition in callback function. So let's summarize this lecture. So whenever we have any asynchronous functions, to get value from asynchronous function we have to use callback function. This callback function is the same function we use when we call this function, and inside this definition of the function we call one callback function. In this callback function we usually get error or data, and whatever we return from callback function is totally position based. So first position is always for error, second position is for the data. So right now this callback function is for data, but what if we get error? So to use callback function for error, at a first position we have to pass a error, and at second position, since we are passing the error only, we don't pass any value. If we don't have any value, we use undefined. So now after 2 seconds our callback functions returning error to us, and let's see how we get this error. Since we have written if else here, we're gonna handle this error inside this function. So let's run this code, and after 2 seconds we get error printed here. So this is all about callback function. So in next video we will see how can we use callback function in the better way, because right now when we call these callback functions it is totally position based. So by mistakenly I can pass data at a first position also. The second thing is that when we use callback function we have to check either we got error or we got a date. So mistakes can be happen anytime. So in next video we will see how can we handle asynchronous function in better way. So thank you for watching this video.